Hello, my name's John Virgo. Well, they asked me to do this cassette. I was wondering what I should talk about. It's funny now when I look back at the success of Big Break and when he first started playing snooker, in Salford. Salford was a funny place, really. It was like Colditz with carpets, it wasn't... It was a strange place, and I always remember we used to go and play the snooker games. And then I'm certain a few of the snooker buffs amongst you will remember. They used to have these aluminium sort of things that were similar shape to a cue, I always remember I used to go on the bus, I used to sit there. And people used to walk past it as though it was one of these handrails you grab hold of, so you don't fall over, But it was my cue, it was a very precious article, so I used to pull it out of the way all the time and have all these people tumbling to the top of the bus, because they tried to grab hold of my cue. Serves them right, really. There's no money in the game then, of course. Well, it was a game that wasn't shown on television. We didn't have coloured television, so that's why we all used to sort of congregate at places like the holiday camps, like Pontins used to have their own particular tournaments, and used to have a pro-am where all the top players come. And I always remember the day when Ray Reardon, who was 6 times world champion at the time, and as I say, it was an amateur professional thing, so that this particular amateur, this Roy Connors, had qualified, and it was probably the biggest moment of his life. He's playing Ray Reardon in the competition. And there was a guy called Mizzle. He used to come from Romford, who thought Steve Davis could walk on water, and that was in the early 70s, when Steve Davis hadn't really been heard of then. And he used to go around refereeing the games, particularly for Steve Davis. Anyway, this Roy Connors, because he's playing Ray Reardon, you've got to imagine the scene at the Pontins holiday camp. And it's very stark. There's about 16 tables, all being played at the same time. And this Mizzle, who's been asked by this Roy Connors, who's playing Ray Reardon, 6 times world champion, has asked him, will he referee the game? So Mizzle's arrived in this, you've got to imagine seeing all these holiday makers in shorts and whatever, and this Mizzle has arrived in an evening suit with a bow tie. And Ray Reardon's turned up, and a big crowd gathered round, obviously want to see how this young Londoner does against the world champion. And Mizzle introduced him, and he went, ladies and gentlemen, the match today is between Roy Connors, semi-finalist in the Neasden snooker tournament, the Ronnie Gross Centre, finalist in the London Home Counties individual, also a pairs winner in the Home Counties Handicap League. Would you please welcome Roy Connors? Big round of applause. Roy Connors came out. And his opponent, Ray Reardon. So which Ray Reardon said, from nowhere actually. But the great story about that, and this is why I've always got great respect for someone like Ray Reardon. Ray never said anything to the guy, and he just went on playing the match. Anyway, there came a situation in one of the frames where he's got to reach right over the reds. And it's an awful long way. So he's asked this guy, this Mizzle who was refereeing, for a long spider. Well, at Pontins, you were lucky to have a table, really. And he's asked him for a long spider. So this Mizzle said, well, I don't think they have them here at the Pontins, Go on, look. So anyway, this Mizzle walked all around the 16 tables and then went downstairs where they've got these 6 match tables and these matches going on, and he's trying to get the other referee's attention. Anyway, about 15 minutes later, everybody sat around just watching this. Nothing's happening, just looking at the table, And Mizzle came back with a long spider. Ray Reardon took the spider off him, went to play the shot and went, no, I've changed my mind. So that was Ray Reardon being the ultimate professional. Yeah, absolutely. Which is more than can be said sometimes, I suppose, for Alex Higgins. I think one of the classic stories, and there's lots of stories about Alex, it goes without saying, but there was a time in Gateshead where Alex, I don't know if a lot of you know, it used to be a jockey, he was an apprentice jockey. And it coincided this night when we was playing this 4-man round robin tournament in the Gateshead Leisure Centre that Hello Dandy had just won the Grand National. And the 4 players that were playing were Alex Higgins, John Spencer, Tony Knowles and myself. And Hello Dandy was the guest of honour. And the lad who had led him round at Aintree, before the Grand National, he came in. And Higgins went up to him and said, "Can I ride the horse round the table?" And the fellow went, "No, it's a bit jumpy as it is with these 1,500 people all clapping, you know." "Oh, come on, I used to be a jockey. I don't care what you used to be, you're not getting on this horse." Well, of course, as we know about Alex, he'll never take no for an answer, and immediately jumped on the horse. The horse reared up and left a lot of horse manure on the floor by the side of the table. And that's when John Spencer came out with probably his greatest ever line. He grabbed hold of the mic and said, "Well, let's be fair, if Alex Higgins sat on your back, you shit yourself his life." It's a true story. Someone once said to me, "Do you think Alex is misunderstood?" I said, "He's more or less caught bang to rights." But Alex, of course, he could find trouble in a desert. It's just unbelievable the situations he gets in. And I was reminded of one not so long ago when, just after he'd won the World Championship in 1982, how it took him 10 years to win it again, I don't know, with his talent. Anyway, in 1982, he wins the World Championship. I'd been offered 3 days' work with Alex over in Ireland, which I knew was going to be a bit of a rough ride. He's now the prodigal son has returned. Your man is now the world champion again, and I was pleased for him like everybody else was, but I wondered how he was going to react, or how he was going to get through the doors of most of the clubs, I can imagine the effect of that. Anyway, it was okay, apart from the fact that the guy who actually promoted it, we didn't know at the time, didn't have any money. So there wasn't much chance of us getting paid. Anyway, I did my 3 days, left on a promise as you're doing these things, but Alex was continuing the tour. Anyway, after about 8 days, the guy who was driving him round, he found out he wasn't going to get paid either. Now, he wasn't a eternal optimist, as probably Alex was, so he decided to abscond with the World Championship trophy, which was being carried around Ireland at the time, to show that Alex had won it. Anyway, he was traced to a mobile home site and was surrounded by Garda police with megaphones saying, "We want the trophy back." And the fella shouting, "You're not getting it back until I get my money." Alex is actually at the scene encouraging the Garda to besiege the mobile home. Anyway, it was all sorted out amicably. Alex did his usual and offered him 2 tickets to his next exhibition. And believe me, that's how much they thought of the man. Unbelievable character. I always remember the time I was playing in Dudley Town Hall and he'd just returned from a trip to Hong Kong. Alex, well, I suppose you could say he's a little bit flash, He's someone who wants you to know that he's got something, if it's new or something. Anyway, he arrived with these shirts made in Hong Kong with double H for Hurricane Higgins on the cuffs, and showing them there. So, JV, Hong Kong, had them made, silk, So I'm going, "Yes, Alex, lovely. Nice shirt, and even when he's playing the game, he's thrusting his left arm out more and more, and sort of adjusting the initials, Anyway, afterwards, as is the norm in these functions, you have to go into the foyer, sit at some table, sign autographs for the people who've been there. Anyway, about, I don't know, maybe 200 or 300 of the people who'd been there all queuing up. They would give me a pen and I'm all ready to get the programme, sign it, autograph, books, whatever. Alex has produced an ink pad and a stamp with A. Higgins on the stamp. No. Not autographed. A. Higgins in block capital letters. Do you want to get one of these, JV? Hong Kong, same as the shirts. So I thought, well, I'm quite happy with the pen, The shirts, I was a little bit jealous, but the stamp, I don't want to stamp people's autograph with my name in block capital letters. Anyway, the first one came along, and this is Alex. Now, you're going to imagine he's got a stamp and he's got an ink pad. Thank you. You won't be able to hear me signing, but I'm signing. I'm writing everything to Charlie, lots of love, wish you were here, everything. I'm absolutely signing everything. All I'm getting from the other side is... Anyway, there was one guy who appears from nowhere. And he says, Alex, my son thinks you're the greatest snooker player in the world. Please, to Christopher, best wishes or whatever, but he thinks you're great. Sorry, only stamping tonight, Dave. And carries on. Anyway, eventually we get through all these people. We get through them all. My arm's sore, you know. Anyway, we've cleared them all out. We've got this one guy and he's still there. He said, Alex, please, my son Christopher thinks you're the greatest snooker player in the world. Here's my pen, please, for him, sign it. And even Alex realised he wasn't going to get away with this one. So he said, okay, babe. What's his name? He said, Christopher. He went, to Christopher, best wishes. Hang on. It's a true story. The amazing thing about Alex Higgins is that he was such a trendsetter. I mean, people always say to me, who was the best snooker player I've ever seen? You know, I never saw Joe Davis, but he couldn't have been better than Higgins. Higgins just reformed the game of snooker completely. I always remember he was so quick around the table, and it was a real thrill to watch him play. And people were taking up the challenge to play like Higgins, you know. And I went in this snooker club in Neath in South Wales, the Mackworth, and they were all playing like Higgins. And they were all knocking one another over and bumping into one another. And it was just mayhem, but it was absolutely great. I think that's what Higgins did for the game, for whatever other things he's done. I mean, who else would play a match with a broken ankle and hop round the table for 9 frames? Who would do that? I always remember the classic line. It was in the local newspaper, I think the Cheshire Times or something, you know. And he'd had an argument apparently with his girlfriend and he'd fell out of the window. And they had a word with the officer in charge, you know, and he said, how is he? He said, he's all right, he fell on his head. You know. So then all of a sudden you move away from your holiday camp thing and you turn in and you get into the professional game. And then you get to a stage where you think, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make an impact on snooker. So you join the board of the WPBSA, the World Professional Snooker and Billiards Control Council. And it was a committee then. There was no money in the game there. And it's great. We all meet in these little hotels, and then all of a sudden we get about £30,000 in the bank, and somebody said, what should we do with it? And someone put his hand up and said, can we buy a chip shop? These were the type of people that were running the game, you know. So when you see those kind of things happening, then you want to get involved more with the association. And as I got more and more involved, eventually I became vice chairman. And I was vice chairman when Alex, who had been practicing downstairs in the practice room at the Crucible Theatre, decided to water the flowers in the corner. He didn't use a watering can, but I mean, it was a gesture anyway. When the security man came up to him and said, you can't do that, Mr. Higgins, he then tore his badge off his blazer. So obviously the Crucible Theatre weren't very pleased, and there was rumours that if we didn't ban him from the tournament, then the tournament wouldn't be allowed to carry on, and the TV didn't like it. But it was all rumours anyway. I mean, Alex went on, and he won the World Championship that year, 1982. And I was now in charge. Well, I wasn't in charge. I was the vice chairman. Rex Williams was the chairman of the board meeting now. That is, in actual fact, the disciplinary committee to judge Alex Higgins and give him the correct punishment for urinating into a plant pot and frightening the life out of the security guard, as well as, you know, tearing his blazer. So we arrived at 10:30 in the morning. The morning after Alex had beaten Ray Reardon in the final. And we're all sat there, tap on the door, and in comes the head waiter with 6 bottles of champagne. 6 bottles of champagne, glasses, oranges, compliments of Mr. Higgins. Right? Well, it's like a criminal sending the judge, you know, a couple of bottles of champagne. But, you know, well, this is Alex, you know, it's all show business, and didn't he play well, wasn't it great, blah, blah, blah. And on the board we had the likes of John Pullman, who liked to drink, you know. I mean, he's looked at the bottle of champagne and thought, well, there's 2 for me. Anyway, we went through any other business and having a sip of the champagne, and the mood was really about Alex, about, well, now he's won the world championship, you know, I think he'll change, you know, and I think this is what's been happening to him. That the fact that he hasn't won it for 10 years was getting to him, frustrating him. That's why he was having all these problems in his private life and the problems, you know, with the game and things like that, you know. Because we used to get letters all the time from referees, you know, where they'd refereed Alex in an amateur game, and because they were going too slow, he was pulling the balls out of the pocket and knocking them out of the way and respotting them himself, you know. They weren't too happy. So you get these complaints, but you take them with a pinch of salt. Pissing in a plant pot and ripping someone's blazer is a problem, you know, and also might have stopped us playing the World Championship to a finish, which, as I say, was only a stupid rumour. Anyway, we've done any other business, and we've gone through the points and the minutes of the meeting, and now, of course, it comes to the disciplinary stage. The 6 bottles of champagne are gone by this time, madam. Anyway, it's now, let's talk about Alex. So I can't remember who it was. Some dreamer, anyway, came up with the idea that, well, Alex, you know, got rid of all his frustrations. He's going to be a good guy, you know, and he'll spread the word. He's good for snooker. We all know he's good for snooker. Everybody loves him, you know, please. I think we should go easy on him this time. Another guy, who I will not mention, said, what are you talking about, Bruce? That's not my best impression of Eddie Charm. Yeah. We can't have him in Australia. They won't allow him in. Yeah, I know your problem's over there, but, you know, I think he can change. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. The door opens, it's Alex Higgins. Morning, babes. Hi, it's all right, well done, great performance. I've reached across Alex, tremendous, you know, great. You know, thanks, JV, you know, blah, blah. Now, look, guys, you know, I know there's this disciplinary here, you know, but I've got the press outside and they all want to know what's happening. Alex, we're discussing it and telling you there's not a problem, all right? We understand, we just go home with Lynn and the kids, just go home, relax, and as soon as we make a decision, we'll ring you. But, you know, we're all winking at him. You know, we're thinking, all right, Alex, you know. Out he goes. Somebody else, yeah, well, you can see it there, you know. He's changed, hasn't he? You know, he's coming, you know, he wants to get home. Obviously, he wants to get home. He's a world champion, you know, again, you know. Anyway, about 10 minutes later, you know, we're getting very near to this decision now, you know. And it's going his way. Even Terry Griffiths is speaking up for it, you know. I mean, there's half a chance here this man could get away with it. The door opens, and it's Alex with his little girl. The same little girl he was holding at the world champion. Now, look, my daughter wants to go home. And we're going, Alex, we understand. We're getting very close to this decision. Please. Well, you know, come on, be fair. You know, I'm going to be a good ambassador for the game. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go everywhere and promote the game. We know you are, Alex. We know you are. Please just go home and we'll ring you first thing. There's not a problem. Wink, wink, wink. We're all winking. We're trying to give him a clue. And out he goes. Well, what do you think? Well, you know, he's got the kid there now. You know, he's changed. He's changed. Won the world championship. That's the thing that's been frustrating him. You know, let's just let bygones be. You know, you can't dredge up bad information. You can't, you know, give a dog a bad name and all that. Well, I don't know, you know. He's not allowed in Australia anymore, you know. All right, Eddie. We know about Australia, Eddie. Even Rhea's gone, nah. He's world champion now. It changes. It changed for me when I won it. Anyway, all of a sudden the door bursts on me. Now listen, Charlton. Now, how he knew this, I don't know. Do you know what you can do with your game in Australia? And do you know what you can do with snooker? Well, up yours and stormed out the door. We're now gone. He hasn't changed. He's still the same guy. Anyway, it got that late and I was working in London that night that I got into the car and there started being a decision made at about 3:30 in the afternoon. We were close to 12:30. 3:30, 3:30, Albert Pierpoint has appeared. So I'm in the car driving to London because I've got a show. And I heard it on the 6:30 news. Alex Higgins, bad boy of snooker, has been fined £2,000 and deducted, I don't know how many points, and suspended. They were letting him off 2 minutes before. So sometimes he's his own worst enemy. It's a true story. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Funny, yeah, when we talk about Alex Higgins, he's a great character, you know. But as I said earlier, I mean, Ray Reardon was one of my favourites. It's funny, you know, I mean, I have great respect for Ray Reardon, and I'd just like to put the record straight. I'm one of his greatest admirers. I watch all those films Monday night, Channel 4, 11 o'clock. I think they're absolutely brilliant. And he brought on himself, you know, because when he won the World Championship, when it was held at the Bellevue in Manchester, people were sort of looking at it and saying, he looks like Bela Lugosi, you know. He's even got fangs and things like that, yeah. But, you know, you don't say it to him. You don't say, "Hiya, Drac." Yeah. So we all think, basically, we're sniggering behind his back. You know, no one's saying Dracula or nothing like that. Anyway, Blow-Me beats Graham Miles in the, I think it was 1974, I think it was, at this Bellevue in Manchester. He's won, he shook hands with Graham Miles, he shook hands with the referee, disappeared backstage, and when he's presented with his trophy, came out in a cloak. So he was having the laugh on us, really. But of course, when I used to fill in for Ray at the Pontins Holiday Camps, I mean, it was great. I used to play in the Ray Reardon snooker room, you know, 6 times world champion. It was great, you know. Prior to filling in for Ray, I did a Butlins holiday circuit, which was, well, horrendous. I played at the Skegness Holiday Camp. And my sense of humour, well, it's a little bit drier than most of them, I think. So I went in the snooker room and there was 36 snooker tables, 40 pool tables, 32 table tennis tables, 36 dart lanes, and a couple of air hockey games, you know, that kids are rattling these things, you know. And I had to go in this room and play an exhibition. Well, you try and tell a subtle joke. There's so much noise going on. I've got ping pong balls hitting my head as I'm down playing the shot. So the only way it could work was with a megaphone. And I used to explain to the red coat, with it being Butlins, exactly the shot I was going to play. You know, there's no point in telling a joke about the shot because, I mean, obviously he's not going to translate it. And he'd turn around going, "John is now going to hit the black and the pink and put them in the 2 corner pockets. Thank you." You know, which really made my trick shots lose a little bit in translation. And it wasn't the best situation, but it was worth it because it was absolutely unbelievable. He used to come to my chalet to meet me 10 minutes before we were playing. He used to get my box of balls in his hand. I had 22 of them at the time. I used to carry my cue, and then we'd play little games with the campers. It wasn't my idea, it was his idea. He'd get the megaphone and he'd go, "Attention, here is an important announcement. An important announcement." And you can imagine all the holiday campers are all coming to the windows, out the doors, stood on the balconies and everything. And he'd go, and they're all screaming, "What did he say? What did he say?" And people are running after us. It was so funny. And then the next holiday camp I did was Warner's. I used to do the Isle of Wight and Ealing Island. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And there were funny little camps, Warner's, because it didn't have the sort of, I mean, at Skegness, 12,000 people used to stay there. At Warner's, you probably, I think the biggest camp that I played anyway, probably held about 600 or something, you know. And that's how many camps as they go. I mean, it was good. You saw some good fun there. I mean, I had one incident where there was a kitchen porter. Anyway, he'd seen Dennis Taylor play this shot on the television where you hit a ball out of somebody's mouth, and he was saying, why don't you play that? And I said, well, it's not part of my routine, you know. Oh, go on, you could play it. Anyway, as the season went on, he kept asking me every week, whenever I saw him, why don't you do the one where you hit the ball out of somebody's mouth? So this particular week, I thought, well, I'll try this. It's not one of my shots. I've never played it before, but I'll try it. You know, so I said, is there any volunteer to lie on the table while I play this shot when I'm going to hit a ball out of the mouth? And of course, he's up there. Thanks, John. You're doing it for me. I'll lie on the table. So he lay on the table and I put the chalk in his mouth and balanced the black ball on top. I said, now what I'm going to do is jump the ball through the air, hit the black ball, it'll go down the table in the pocket. I've hit him slap bang on the nose. The tilting of his head allowed the black to fall, run down the table and go in the pocket. I got a tremendous round of applause. He's now holding his nose as he's starting to drip blood. So, well, you seen what you've done in my nose? I said, I told you, I've never played the shot before. And then, of course, as the summer goes on, they start doing the cheaper holidays at the end. And I did 7 holiday camps. And practically everyone I've been to on the Isle of Wight said, we don't need you next week because it's the disabled week. And they usually go out on the coach trips and this, that, you know. So I said, oh, great, no problem. Anyway, I've gone to this camp and this guy said, you'll be here next week at the same time. I said, well, the others don't really want me. No, I'd like you to be here. I think we should give everybody an opportunity to see whatever they want to see. I mean, I said, I couldn't agree with you more, you know. Anyway, I went down this week and I've met the green cult. They were at Warner Brothers. Going to the snooker room. There's not one person in the snooker room. Apparently they've gone out on a coach trip. But the camp's not very busy anyway. And I'm there, all suited up, bow tie, wing collar, you know. So the green coat said, John, you know, I'll do this with you every week. He says, is there any chance of me having you again? I said, certainly. I'm paid to be here. Why not have a game? Get on the table, start hitting the balls about. All of a sudden, 2 kitchen porters come in. Big white hats, floppy hats, you know, all in the whites, you know. A bit greasy, as you know. Do you mind if we have a game, John? You know, there's no one here. No, certainly, lads, carry on. So they take their hats off, set the balls up and start hitting the balls round. All of a sudden, the door's open. There's about 40 people. They've all returned from the coach trip to come and watch the snooker. Where do they go? They go and sit and watch the kitchen porters play. 40 people watch the kitchen porters play. And their evening suit, bow tie. They're in whites, covered in old egg yolk that's been spilt on them at breakfast. And 40 people are watching them. Anyway, as I said, the next year I filled in for Patsy at the Warner Brothers holiday camps. And it was that particular year that I won the United Kingdom Championship. I suppose it was a good year and a bad year, really. I got to the semi-final world and lost to Dennis Taylor, who in turn got beat by Terry Griffiths in the final. And then 4 months later, I played Dennis Taylor in the semi-final, beat him. I played Terry Griffiths, who was then the world champion, in the final, and beat him, and got there late. One people asked me, how did you possibly turn up late? And it was just basically that we used to always play at 2 o'clock, and for some reason, for television, they brought it forward to 1 o'clock. Anyway, I'm late, I get deducted 2 frames. Anyway, it gets really exciting. All of a sudden, I look down the table, and the camera's there, but there's no one behind it. So it's a little bit eerie, you know, and apparently there's a message coming through that the BBC have gone on strike, and that's it. So with all this going on, they had, I've lost 2 frames. Anyway, eventually, somehow, and I still don't know how I did it to this day, I went 13-12 behind, and I finished up winning 14-13. Unfortunately, I'm telling you, and that's the only record you'll have of it, because the BBC were on strike, and it was never saw the light of day. which is a sad thing in a way, but also a nice thing to have. But as I say, if I'd have done it 4 months earlier, I'd have been saying, no, I was a former world champion instead of a former UK champion. So that's why.
End of part 1. For more rare snooker videos, subscribe to the channel.
So then, yeah, snooker became really popular, and of course, from that early groundings of the holiday camp, then you have to learn how to entertain people. And that's where the impersonations came from. And because of those impersonations, you get, particularly at the World Championships, when a match is over early, then people ask you. And I always remember David Vine saying to me, after I first done the impersonation, he said that was £25,000 worth of free publicity. As it turns out, it's worth a lot more than that. Because from that, of course, you get invited to be in a live entertainment programme, i.e. such as Big Break. And then you get the opportunity to work with someone, well, like Jim Davidson. Now, if this was his tape, and there was children in the car, he'd have probably switched it off by now. Jim always says to me, he's had more wives than I've had hot dinners. And the thing nice about a hot dinner is once you've had it and you've paid for it, you don't have to pay for it anymore. And she's going. I suppose really I should tell you about the first show of Big Break when Alex Higgins was on. And the first series, we didn't really have an idea about a waistcoat. But Alex came on and he was wearing this very fancy waistcoat, which we didn't realise at the time, but had been given to him, or on the understanding that he got the guy to mention a fellow called Gilby from Savile Row. So anyway, Jim Davidson and I stood in the wings, and we got a message from the floor manager to say that Alex is wearing this fancy waistcoat. Would Jim mention it? So Jim, being a great professional, said, yeah, of course I will. Anyway, Jim goes out, speaks to the contestant. He introduces Alex, who walks out with this fancy waistcoat. And Jim, true to his word, said, that's a nice waistcoat. Alex, where have you got that? He said, Gilby's, and not the gin. to which Jim Davison went over, went, smells like gin. And of course, that's one of the problems that Alex can put his foot in it. But that did give us the idea of wearing these fancy waistcoats. And of course, it become very popular. And people say to me about the trick shots and how do you work them out. I mean, it's like any joke you tell, I suppose. You steal them off somebody else. No, I think they're just different versions of a particular shot where a ball's got to go in a pocket and you just try and find the different ways to do it. Then, of course, one of my great loves, which has always been my great love, even while I was playing snooker, and of course I was lucky enough eventually to own a racehorse of my own, because my great passion and my great love has always been horse racing. I don't know if any of you ever backed the horse. He won 8 races for me. He's called Jolkist. It was J-O for John, K-I for Kirk, which was Kirk Stevens, and S-T for Steve, which was, well, not Steve Davis. It was a friend of mine called Steve. I always remember, after its 2-year-old days, it won its first ever race and then didn't do much after that, so we had it gelded or whatever. Which means it can't breed anymore, but it's supposed to help them concentrate on racing. Anyway, it seemed to work, because as a 3-year-old, his first race he didn't do very well, next race he was second, and then he ran up a hat-trick. And I always remember I was in this snooker club, and Neil Foles came up to me and he said, the horse is doing well, how much is it worth now? I said, well, unfortunately, at the end of its 2-year-old days, we had it gelded. He said, well, that's a shame. I said, well, not really. I said, the fact that it now concentrates solely on racing, you know, it doesn't think of fillies or anything like that, it just concentrates 110% on racing. It's obviously got in its mind that all it wants to do is race. I said, it's like snooker players. I said, if you're playing a World Championship, 10:30, Sheffield, you can't be out drinking, nightclubbing it, going with girls. You've got to concentrate 110% on snooker. And Neil Foles said to me, I wonder if Steve Davis has been gelded. Which was the funniest line I've ever heard from Neil Foles, but it's true. But I love horse racing. Not as much as Willie Thorne, I've got to say that. 60% of his money went on the horses, 30% went on women, and he wasted the other 10%. But a great character, and call the 147 man. He has a friend of his called Racing Raymond, who's a great character. But he used to do this great racing commentary. He used to be able to give him a list of names, and he'd do a commentary as though he was Peter O'Sullivan and this and the other. So anyway, this particular evening, it was down the UK Championship in Preston. And Racing Raymond's appeared at the bar, so we're having a late night drink. I wasn't playing in the tournament, I was commentating. Willie was, but he'd gone to bed and there was a few other people around. So somebody said, Raymond, why don't you do a racing commentary? So he went, oh, yeah, certainly, you know. So I said, well, look, what we'll do, we'll write down a list of names and you can read the race out. All right, then. But don't you look, go over there so we don't know which horse was picked out. We'll pick it out, we'll have a draw, right? And we'll see who gets the winner, or I'll put a pound in. So someone would win, right? Oh, yeah, we did that. So we did it on a fictitious Grand National, right? Which West Tip won it, apparently, which was horse he backed. It was the only Grand National winner he ever backed. But it's now hard put us wise that what we should do is try and pick winners that we think he knows are good. Anyway, now we've gone to take it a step further. We've now done a list of Derby horses, and I'm going to run a book, right, on this race, this fictitious Derby. Seabird, who was one of the best horses ever, was in the race. Rebo, which was supposed to be the greatest racehorse, but all the Mill Reef, Nijinsky, everything we'd put in this race. And I opened a book. I went 2-1 Rebo, 3-1 Seabird, 6-1 another one, 12-1 Troy. As far as £50 on Troy. All right, his mate has £20 on it as well. I'm thinking, wait a minute. From a friendly situation, I now stand to lose £750. We're having a drink at a bar. And I'm looking at him thinking, and they're friends of Raymond's, and he's going to do the commentary. I'm getting a bit concerned. But I've said it, and all I've got for the rest of them, I've had £2 each way on Nijinsky. But I've got a liability of £70 going on a 12-1 chance, which has rapidly gone to 4s, but no one wants to back it now, anyway. So I'm a bit concerned. Anyway, I will now try and give you a little impression of the commentary from Racing Raymond. Well, here we are now, we're here at Epsom, and it's a lovely day, the sun's shining, we're all going, get on with it, Raymond, you know, I'm starting to lose £800 here, get on with it. All right, well, they're off at Epsom, and the first one to show is Rebo now from Seabird. I'm thinking, oh, I hope Rebo wins it, because Rebo, no one's back Rebo, actually. It's in the book. Coming down Tottenham, oh, and Rebo's not handling the course. Rebo has dropped last, and I think he's being pulled up. And as they swing into the straight with 3 furlongs to go, Troy has now gone clear. And I'm thinking this is definitely a ringer, this. He's got his 2 pals coming, they must do it everywhere. You know, you imagine the emotions of it. Anyway, Seabird caught it on the line, and Raymond said it was the best Derby win I've ever seen, Seabird. But at the time, I was right, and it was going to be Troy. And it's a true story. The farmer was walking through his land, and he came across this pond. And by a pond, he saw a golden toad, and he'd not seen one of these for years. So he was staring at the golden toad and didn't want to disturb it, and he turned to walk away, and a little voice said, "Help me, help me." And he looked round, he couldn't see anybody. And the golden toad said, "It's me." Like, you can speak. A wicked witch did this to me 6 months ago. He said, well, how can I help you? Well, the only way I can be saved is to sleep with a human being. So the farmer, being a generous man, picked up the golden tool, took it back to his house, took it upstairs, laid it on the pillow, and put his head next to it and fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, it was a 16-year-old blonde-haired prince. And that is the case for the defence, Your Honour. One of the nice things, you know, about snooker becoming popular was the fact that we got all these little perks now. You know, we get this Bupa healthcare. Bupa's great, you know. I was talking to a guy who was given 6 months to live. He couldn't pay his bill, so they gave him another 6 months. I knew a guy once who worked in a hospital, and he used to take the sperm samples, you know. And the guy had to go in and give a sperm sample in one of these little bottles, and they give him a couple of magazines, and he was in there about half an hour really going through a bad time. And then all of a sudden he heard this groaning and thinking that the next cubicle, he stood on a chair, looked over, and there's a guy lay on the bed with 2 girls all over him. And he said, "Hey, what's happening here?" And he went, "Oh, you're not in Bupa then." But I always remember this Irishman who was in New York. He was in this bar in New York. And he was having a chat with the barman, and he was telling him he'd just come over from Dublin. He'd only been in America a day. And he was looking for somewhere to live. And all of a sudden, this big American came up and he went, "Excuse me, buddy," he said, "I heard you talking there." He said, "I've got an apartment down the road." He said, "You can come and stay and rent that if you like." He said, "Come down, no obligation, have a look." Anyway, the Irishman went down to this apartment. And he's shown him into the lounge, and the American's gone off. And he's having a look round. All of a sudden, the door opens. This American's dressed in a little schoolboy's uniform and a whip. And he said, "I've been a naughty boy. I've not been to school today," and gives the Irishman the whip. Anyway, that evening, he's relaying the story to the barman. And the barman says, "Well, what did you do?" He said, "I bet he goes to school tomorrow." That was basically, I think, in the early days, because there was only 2 tournaments, then you had to learn this comedy, you know. And as I say, I'm unfortunately relaying the story about Patsy Fake, and he was unable to get into this, you know. And anyone who's ever done the Hawdy camps will always tell you this, the amazing things that happen. I remember David Taylor once, he'd started working these Pontins Hawdy camps. And he went in and had a look at the table, and for a Hawdy camp table, it wasn't in too bad a condition. And there was this young lad who used to help clearing the pots away at the bar. Said he loved snooker. Could he possibly assist in any way? And David said, "It'd be nice if it was brushed every week, you know, before we go and play the match, you know." "Oh, no problem, I'll do that for you." And he said, "I love snooker." He said, "I'll brush the table for you. And every morning before you get there, I'll brush the table." Anyway, that morning, David arrived a little bit early just to make certain everything was right. And the guy was stood on the table with a sweeping brush, brushing the table. It's a true story. And then, of course, my other great passion is football, representing Manchester United on Big Break. And the television area that covers the Manchester football clubs is Granada. And at the start of the 1993-1994 season, they got Alex Ferguson as Manchester United manager and Peter Reid, who was then the Manchester City manager. And they got him in really just to discuss what was going to happen during the football season. And they said to Peter Reid, who was, as I say, then the manager of Manchester City, what his hopes were for Man City. And he said, "Well," he said, "I think we've built a fair squad of players together, and we're hoping to get a good middle position in the league, hoping for a good run in the FA Cup to get some revenue to buy some players. And we've got some good young players coming through, and hopefully that will show up in their Central League performances." "Oh, it's very good, Peter. What about you, Alex?" "Well," he said, "I think we'll win the league again. I think we're certain to win the FA Cup. I think we could probably win the Coca-Cola Cup, and as everybody knows, we've got such a squad of players, I think we're certain to win the Central League." He said, "Well, that's going a bit over the top, Alex, isn't it?" He said, "Well, Peter started it." A lot of people don't see Jim Davis in his true light. He really makes people feel at home. And I know he says things occasionally which might shock people. I'll give you an example. I remember one contestant on who was a vet. She was a pet vet, and he kept saying, "Oh, you're not one of them that does that all creatures great and small and puts your arm up a cow's..." She's saying, no, I only deal with budgies and cats and dogs. So, oh, that's pretty good. Anyway, he talks to the next contestant. This was just rehearsals, of course, and he went up to the last one. He said, hello, your name's Marion. Where are you from? Sorry, oh, good. You're not a vet, are you? She went, no, I'm not. He said, oh, you don't like cows' arses then? That was her intro to the show. Yeah, but when we're doing Big Break, I think one of the things that you probably don't notice are going wrong, because obviously it's edited, it's not done live. Whenever we use special effects, these sort of things can go wrong. I always remember the time when they got the robot into the studio to play a show. And they put a fancy waistcoat on, and they put a beard on it. But as it worked out, the actual trigger would only move about an inch. And somehow they wanted me to do a trick shot with this robot, you know, which was very difficult because I've never heard of an inch doing the trick in any walk of life, you know. But those type of things that they bring on, it's not the naivety really of the people who work on the show. I always remember when I first brought the basket, and I'm certain you've seen the trick shot where you hit the ball in a basket, and there's the one trick shot where you put the ball in the basket, you hit the other ball in, the basket spins round, the ball you've hit in stays in, and the ball that was in comes out. Unfortunately, when I did it in rehearsal with everybody watching, the ball also went in a pocket, and everybody said, oh, that's unbelievable. But the fact that the other ball went in the pocket was just sheer luck, you know. But when he didn't work on the evening, everybody said, all right, stop. Now, which pocket is it going to go in? Just going back to television and how people look on things a different way, because obviously, I mean, the score you actually see when there's an actual snooker match on isn't the actual score that the players see. They have a scoreboard in the arena. And of course, TV has their own captures. And I always remember playing an amateur tournament at Granada Television. It was for the best amateurs or the best 8 amateurs were invited to play in this tournament, the Granada Television tournament. And we arrived in the studio and it had seating for about 100 people. Nice lighting, referee there, but no scoreboard. And when the referee said, well, where's the scoreboard? The producer said, oh, I thought they kept a note of it in their heads. Which doesn't bear thinking about going up to Alex Higgins and saying, I'm sorry, Alex, you want a snooker? Oh, no, I don't, Dave. You went enough before and you gave me 4 points away. It was just unbelievable. And of course, the commentary thing comes into television, and you've got situations where people thrust things upon you. I remember one particular time, I mean, Ted Lowe obviously is famous for his great remarks, you know, for those of you in black and white, the pink is behind the red. I mean, that was one of his greats. And of course, the other great he came out with, there was when in 1978, Fred Davis, at the remarkable age of 64, was playing in the semi-final of the World Championship that year. And it was like one of those awkward shots where you don't know to stretch over the table, get the rest. Anyway, in the end, he decided to play it left-handed. And that raised the immortal line from Ted Lowe, at Fred's age, he doesn't get his leg over anymore. He prefers to use his left hand. And of course, Ted was there, and Dennis Taylor, when I got the wind-up on Noel Edmonds' house party, when I got the Gotcha Oscar with Right Said Fred. When I look at the video now, when I was singing lines, I'm too sexy with my beard on, I'm too sexy for Ray Reardon. How I actually sang it without laughing, I don't know. Because I really believed it was true. And the strange thing was, my manager brought his wife, and I took my girlfriend, Nikki. And she likes Right Said Fred, so I mean, it was nice that we were there, we were in the studio. So I keep looking out, because they won't let me out of the studio for some reason, which is a bit odd. I mean, Richard Fairbrass, the lead singer, is saying, John, if you want a beer, I'll go and get it. I thought, this is a multi-million-pound pop star, and he's running around getting me beers. I thought, I've arrived here. I've arrived. I'll shave my head, I'll be in the group next week. This is what I'm thinking. Anyway, eventually, I have got out of the sound studio, what I would call it. But Nicky's not there. So I said to Troy, where's Nicky? Oh, they're upstairs watching a film on the television. I said, a film? I'm recording and recording. And she's upstairs watching a film on the television. I said, can you believe that, Ted? So Ted Lowe, he went, no. I said, where's your wife? He went, she's up there with them. Unbeknown to me, of course, they're up there watching it on a monitor, what's happening to me down below. I've now insisted that she comes down. She made some excuse that, well, there wasn't any room in here. I said, you sit there, you like this group, you sit there, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I said, I'm not certain about this. What do you think? She went, you're doing great. So there I go, shoulders back, I'm in again for another 20 minutes. Yeah. But I enjoyed it. The only sickening was I thought it was going to be a number one hit. I was the only one who did. It's a true story. Of course, the world champion now and the man who keeps stopping Jimmy White from winning it is Stephen Hendry. I mean, as he's got on record and said that if he hadn't been playing Jimmy in the final, then he'd have wanted Jimmy to win it as well. But it's funny how these opinions change. I always remember the first time I ever saw Stephen Hendry, I'd heard about him and he was just going to be a tremendous talent. And he was playing in the UK Championship, the first time I think he ever played in it. And he got through a couple of rounds and he was playing the last match to qualify for the television stage. And he was playing, of all people, Higgins. And Alex broke off in the deciding frame, left Stephen on the cushion. Mo, potted a ball from nowhere and made 50-odd, but unfortunately run out of position. Didn't play a very good safety shot, and Alex has cleared the table, which is just an incredible clearance, you know, even when Alex wasn't at his best. And I always remember afterwards going up to Stephen and saying, well, lucky Stephen, you played well. He went, why does it always happen to me? He was only 17. And then, of course, talking about Steve Davis. Steve's always had a very funny sense of humour. I remember the time when we were in India, and for some reason, I don't know, from that part of the world, they have a great problem saying the V's. And we'd been there for 8 days, and everybody was calling me John Virgo, you know. And Steve and I, I think it's called the Bombay International now, we'd gone upstairs to this French restaurant. But of course, be it French, Chinese, or whatever, they're all Indians, you know. So he said, I think we'll get our own back here. So I said, oh, all right, then what are you going to do? So the waiter came up and he went, can I get you a drink? He went, we'll have 2 vodkas and orange. To which the waiter said, I'm very, very sorry, sir. We got plenty vodka, but no orange. He got us. True story. I'll tell you a silly joke. We played these qualifiers in Blackpool, and in Blackpool there's a lot of summer shows going on, and there was a story about Mary Poppins, who rang up this guest house and she said, hello, my name's Mary Poppins, have you got a room for the night? And the guy went, Mary Poppins? He said, I thought you were saying one of the bigger hotels, like the Imperial or somewhere like that. No, I don't like crowds, she said. Have you got a room? He said, yeah. Anything I can do for you? She said, well, I'll be coming home from the theatre late, but when I get up in the morning, I'd like a little bit of breakfast before I set off. He said, anything you want, Mary, just so you're staying at my guest house, a great thrill, whatever you want. What can I get you? She went, well, I wouldn't mind a couple of poached eggs, and if possible, a bit of cauliflower cheese. No problem. No problem whatsoever. Anyway, she comes home that night. He doesn't see her, but he sees her next morning. There she has as a breakfast. She said, how much do I owe? He said, oh, nothing. He said, just the fact that Mary Poppins has stayed in my guest house. He said, that's more than enough reward. He said, if you could possibly sign the register, make a comment, I'd be over the moon. She went, certainly. Anyway, she went over to register, wrote in it, left. He thought, I wonder if she's written. So he looks and he's got Mary Poppins. Super cauliflower eggs, they were atrocious. I like the silly gags. I like the one about the 3 northern girls, Hilda, Ethel and Fanny. and they all had big feet. Hilda took a size 9, Ethel took a size 10, and Fanny took a size 13. Anyway, the three of them went to the local dance hall, and Ethel and Hilda are dancing. And one of these guys said, "You've got big feet." And Hilda said, "You want to see our Fanny's?" And then there's the other one, isn't there, about the kid who's in his back garden, you know, and he's crying. Well, his dad comes over and he goes, "What's the matter, son?" He said, "It's me tortoise, Dad." He said, "Look at it." He said, "All the shell's flaking," he said, "and his little eyes are all dripping," he said, "and look at his little legs." He said, "Look, son, they don't live as long as us. You know, he's a tortoise. They only live for so long." He said, "But look, when he dies," he said, "don't worry." He said, "I'll take you down the road," he said, "and I'll buy you a new bike," he said. "I'll buy all those little chopper bikes," he said, "and get you a nice little helmet and on that," he said, "so don't worry." And the kid said, "Can we kill him now?" I want you to imagine the scene as a street in Salford. And all of a sudden there's a great cry of, "It's a miracle! It's a miracle!" And everybody sort of come into the front door. And this woman went running in the kitchen. She said, "Harry, what is it?" He said, "You can't believe it." He said, "I've just buttered this piece of toast. It's fell out of my hand and landed the butter side up. It's a miracle. I'm telling you, it's a miracle." "Well, it's unusual, Harry. Has it ever happened to you?" "Oh, no, I must admit, if ever I've buttered a piece of toast and it slips out of my hand, it's always landed butter side to the floor." "Well, it's a miracle. I wanted to get the local priest and tell him we've got a miracle here." She said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." Anyway, she rings up the local priest. He comes in. I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, I'm buttering this piece of toast. It dropped out of my hand and landed butter side up." He said, "Well, you can't claim a miracle for that." He said, "Has it ever happened to you?" He said, "Well, no. No, I must admit, it's never happened to me." He said, "Well, I want to claim it as a miracle. Nothing wrong with that. Oh, all right, I'm just an ordinary guy from Salford. But a miracle has happened in my kitchen. I want it recognised." Anyway, he gets onto the Archbishop. He said, "There's a fella," he said, "who lives at Robertson Street in Salford." He said, "He's buttered a piece of toast. It's dropped out of his hand and landed butter side up. He's claiming a miracle." He said, "You can't have a miracle for that." So he said, "Well, has it ever happened to you?" He said, "Because he's asked me, it's never happened to me." He went, "Well, no, it hasn't." "All right, well, I'll give it to the Vatican." He said, you know, it's just a man claiming something. I'll take it to the Vatican." Anyway, there they are at the Vatican. You got the Pope, all the archbishops, all the cardinals all sat round. He said, "Well, we've got a letter here," he says, "from a priest in Salford. One of his flock has buttered a piece of toast. He's dropped on the floor and landed butter side up. Can we say this is a miracle?" And they've all gone, "No, you can't say that's a miracle." "Well, is there anyone here that it's happened to?" And they all go, "Oh, no. Well, how can you say it's not a miracle? I don't think we should be too hasty on this." Anyway, about 3 weeks later, this Harry Tonkinson gets a letter from the Vatican, Rome, from the Pope's secretary. Said, "We have had your application for a miracle regarding the buttered piece of toast that landed butter side up. And the Pope, in his ultimate wisdom, doesn't believe you can call this a miracle. In his opinion, you buttered the wrong side of the toast." One of the problems, of course, coming from Salford, you know, people always say Manchester, and it's not Manchester, it's Salford. You know, I mean, it is a city of its own, you know. It was probably brought to light a couple of years ago when Prince Charles came to open the university. And he had a fox on his head, and the mayor said, "Excuse me, Your Highness, what are you doing with that and that fox on your head?" He said, "Well, it was Mammy's idea. She said to me this morning, 'Charles, where you off?' He said, 'Salford.' She said, 'Where the fox at?'" So, I hope we've had a laugh, and I hope some of the stories, mainly true, you've enjoyed. There was obviously times in snooker when it wasn't that good for me. You know, you lose matches and You know, you think the world's going to end, and until you look round and see that other people are a lot worse off than yourself. And as Robert Benchley once said of Cunnilingus, it's dark and lonely work, but somebody's got to do it. Say goodnight, JV.